Now, just a really quick recap, what is resistance? Resistance is something that our subconscious does when we're in a growth process. When we're looking to grow our business or grow our relationships or grow our life or education or health in some way, oftentimes, more often than not actually, our subconscious will bring resistance up to the forefront in order for us to not move forward. Now, it's not that our subconscious doesn't want us to move forward, but our subconscious has a modus operandi that safety is primary versus growth. So it's going to bring up elements in ourselves, naturally within ourselves, in order to make it more difficult for us to change something in our lives. Now, resistance isn't good or bad in and of itself, but we do need to know about it if we want to be on a growth path. If you ever want to change something in our lives, resistance will come up. It absolutely will, because that's the process, the way it works with our subconscious. So becoming aware of our resistance patterns in and of themselves is a very powerful way to begin experiencing more growth, happiness, love, abundance in our lives. Now, no one really likes to be labeled as the resistance archetype, right? We all love to be labeled as our superpowers. So we want to have fun with the resistance archetypes. You've already taken the quiz, you've got a printout in front of you, or you've got an idea of where you land on the spectrum based on your elemental nature, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So, tongue in cheek, let's enter into this with some humor and some relaxation and a little bit of jovialness, so that we can have some fun with it and lightheartedness, overcome our resistance patterns, and really grow and experience life in a much deeper and fuller way. So I'm going to pull up a quick screen share, and we're going to talk about the work that we've done with the 5 primary resistance archetypes. Now, this work has grown out of our deep understanding, knowledge, and work that we've done with the 5 elements and the Taoist medicine wheel. So the 5 elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, and this comes out of traditional Chinese medicine. Now, when we think about the Taoist medicine wheel, the Taoists would look at the universe or the world as always being in a natural process, And one of the natural processes that goes on in the world are the seasons. So if we look at the right side of this wheel, we see spring. And spring is going to drop down to the bottom and always turn into summer. Summer will always turn into autumn, and autumn will always turn into winter. No matter how long the world's been here, right? That's how it's always been, and that's how it's always going to be. And you never jump from spring to autumn or from summer to winter. They always go in that process. They never go backwards. This is how they always are. And so as students of natural law and natural processes, we come to depend on the things that are always reliable. And this is one of the things that's always reliable. So the traditional Chinese medicine would also look at other natural processes, and these happen to be elements. So we began to pair elements with the seasons. So if you look again under spring, wood. Wood is the element of spring. Wood has to do with growing, plants exploding through the ground in the springtime, trees just growing like bonkers. So wood is associated with spring. Now the summer is fire. Think about the heat of the sun. Autumn and metal. Metal's the element of autumn. You might think, well, what the heck does that have to do with something? Well, philosophically, metal has to do with alchemy, or becoming more purified, letting go of the dross, letting go of the impurities in a process. So in the autumn, when the trees drop their leaves, they're letting go of something that no longer serves them. They're becoming more pure within and of themselves. So metal is associated with autumn, and water is associated with winter. Think about ice and snow. Okay, now the earth sits right at the middle. Earth doesn't necessarily, in our medicine wheel, earth doesn't have a time of the year it's associated with. In some medicine wheels, associated in late summer. But in our medicine wheel, it's right at the center because the seasons revolve around it. Okay? Now, each one of these seasons and elements in particular actually has emotional polarities associated with it. So let's look at wood. Wood's emotional polarities are anger and righteousness. On one side, we have a debilitating anger. On the other side, we have a pointed, clear righteousness. I'm right. This is the way that it's supposed to be. And of course, you can see those emotions blend together as well. Okay, summer. Summer is associated with hate and joy. Autumn is associated with grief on one end and attachment on the other end. And the winter, or the water element, is associated with fear and hubris. In the center, we have earth associated with anxiety and addiction. Now, when we're talking about emotional polarities, again, just another note that emotions aren't good or bad in and of themselves. However, we do know this, that when we start to experience emotional polarities or emotional extremes, they start to become a lot less functional for us in our lives. Like when we want to be able to, again, go on a growth path, we grow most when we are experiencing balance, and emotional balance is one of those things. I think we can all come up with stories or examples of when our growth path has been stunted by emotional extremes that we've experienced. Now, each one of these elements is also associated with an archetype. So you've done the archetype quiz. You probably have an idea of where you land in here already, but let's just go through them really quickly. So the wood element is associated with the judge. We'll go into the depth of these in just a moment. The summer or the fire element is associated with the victim. The autumn or the metal element is associated with the control freak. The loner is associated with the water element in the wintertime, and the people pleaser is right at the earth. Now, why do we use these archetypical names associated with each one of these elements? It's really because of the primary behaviors that go along with the name. Okay, so if we look at the primary behaviors that go along with each one of these names, in the wood element, it's really about judgment. So think about anger and righteousness. The catchphrase of the wood element is, I'm right, you're wrong. It's my way or the highway. Like that's just how it's going to be. So if you came up with a judge in your archetypical example, you're probably kind of a wood element type person. And again, no elements are good or bad, right or wrong, but we need to know more about ourselves so we know how resistance shows up. Because when it shows up that way, it's very difficult for us to actually make a change and have a different experience in our life, which is what we're looking for when we're looking to grow. Now, the fire element is associated with being needy or the victim. Think about fire. Fire doesn't have good boundaries. Fire will just spread all over the place, right? And so this is the same way with fire people. Fire people happen to have more porous boundaries than other people do. And this can often set up relationships that are relatively kind of codependent in nature, where we need someone else to do something in order for us to have our change. And so kind of help me is the catchphrase of the fire element. Swinging back over there to the metal element. This has to do with the controlling behavior. And this is why we talk about this person as being the control freak. Because think about the metal element wants to keep it together. They want to be very stiff upper lip, want to be perfect, have everything just in its right place. And then the water element is associated with just not showing up. The winter is about going inward and not coming out of your cave. And the earth in the middle is associated with confusion. Now, here's the interesting thing. Natural process. Spring always goes to summer, always goes to autumn, always goes to winter. It all circles around the earth, which is the hub of all of this experience. So here's the thing. Doesn't matter where you start on this wheel. If you don't get off the wheel, you're going to go through the whole process, just like spring always goes into summer and so on. If you've ever noticed, when you're experiencing really extreme judgment and we're really judging somebody and they're like, they're so freaking wrong. I'm right and they're wrong. What we've actually inadvertently done is we have become codependent with that person, because now we need them to do something different in order for us to feel better about ourselves, or for us to feel righteous, or us to feel vindicated, or something like that. We have unwittingly become the victim and in need of that person. Oftentimes when we realize that, we bring it back together, right? We kind of get this stiff spine. We're like, well, I'm going to do this all myself, and I'm going to figure it out. And we end up with this controlling type of attitude. And this can happen in a millisecond, over days, weeks, months, or years, this whole process. But this is the process that we go through naturally, which is, I think it's so amazing because it's built in as a part of this natural witnessing of through the medicine wheel. So we pull ourselves together, right? And eventually when we realize we just can't keep it together any longer, we fall apart. And we fall apart and we end up kind of having to let go of something that we don't want to let go of. We fall like heck to try to keep this thing as our life. We just got to let it go. And then we go into a place where kind of in a place maybe of despair, but inwardness. We come inward and we decide, I'm not coming out until I figure this thing out. And so then we're not showing up anymore. We're not showing up for our calls. We're not showing up for our clients or for our coaching or whatever it is. And when we go around on this wheel and we don't get off the wheel, you know what? We just end up being completely confused about everything anyway. So it's like, I really don't know what to do anymore. So each one of these elements, or each one of these archetypes has a catchphrase associated with it. And the catchphrase are these. Okay, so the judge is I'm right, you're wrong. So if you find yourself saying these catchphrases, again, you're in resistance. The victim is, I need help because I can't do this myself. I need someone else to do something so that I can solve my problem. The control freak is, I will not fall apart. I'm not going to let this thing come apart. I'm not going to let go of this, right? And then the loner is, I'll figure it out for myself and then I'll show up. That's when I'll come out of my cave. And the people pleaser is, I just don't know what the heck to do because everybody wants me to do something different. I can't please anybody. And so now we're in the earth archetype. So hopefully this is making sense for you in seeing yourself in one of these, at least starting in one of these archetypes. You have to ask yourself this question. Have I ever gone around this whole wheel and end up in complete confusion and not knowing where to turn or what to do? And if you think about it, the way you got into that center point was you went around this wheel altogether. So hopefully this little video training here has helped to give you a better idea about all of the 5 resistance archetypes, where you land on the wheel, maybe a little bit about your emotional polarities, and maybe a way to start thinking about how you can let go of that resistance in order to have better growth opportunities, love, and abundance in your life as well.